Hello and welcome to Craft with Sarah and day 15 of the Christmas Craft Countdown, where I'm sharing a brand new Christmas themed paper craft to make with your Cricut every day for 20 days. Today's project is this lovely festive shadow box design that you can add any letter and name to make it fully personalised. I'll show you how to customise the design in Cricut Design Space to add your wording to the front. If you'd rather make it without anything in the middle just so that you can see the lovely leaves behind, I've also included a second version of this cut file in today's project that doesn't have the strip across, so that if you wanted to, you could make it with the pattern in the middle in the circle and not put any customization on it. But whichever one you decide to make, first you're going to need those files, so here is how to download them. Let's get started! The files for this project are free for the next 24 hours. Here's how to download them. Register a free ticket for the Christmas Craft Countdown at craftwithsarah.com/Christmas24. After registering, you'll get an email which contains a link to the schedule page for the countdown. Visit the schedule page to find and download today's files. Each download is only available for free for 24 hours after it goes live. If you've missed some, check out the Instant Access Bundle at craftwithsarah.com/Christmas24 bundle, which gives immediate and ongoing access to all of the files from the Christmas Craft Countdown, plus lots of extra bonus designs. The download comes in a zip folder. You need to unzip this before uploading the SVG files into Cricut Design Space. The download folder for today's project includes two versions of this shadow box. Each one is a separate SVG file, so if you want to make both of them, you'll have to upload each SVG to Design Space one at a time. If you're not sure how to do that, check out the schedule page for the Christmas Craft Countdown, and within there, look for the Foundation Learning section near the top of the page. This contains lots of useful tutorials, but one of those is on how to upload SVGs into Cricut Design Space, and that gives you a full walkthrough of the entire process. This is what the two versions of the design look like. You've got one which has this horizontal stripe across the middle. This is the one I'll be using for this tutorial to show how you can add a name in there. And there's also one that doesn't have that stripe, so if you just wanted to cut this as it is without any further personalizations, then you would use this one. But for me, I don't want this one right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete it, and instead we'll work with this one. Before we get into customizing the design, let's measure our shadow box to find out how big to make the SVG. Before we start adding the names into the monogram frame, it's probably a good idea to actually make it the right size to fit in your frame if you've already purchased one. This is a box frame or shadow box which I have purchased and actually used in a previous project, and I've taken it all apart. I've taken all the bits out. I've removed the glass just because otherwise it will reflect my camera. And you'll probably find that your frame has a wooden spacer inside, just a little bit of wood that goes all the way around the edge. Mine did have one. I have no idea where I put it, so I can't show you that, but it doesn't matter because I've still got the back of the frame and we can measure this instead. If you had the spacer, you could measure from one side all the way to the other, but it works exactly the same measuring the back of the frame. So here's my ruler. I'm going to lie it flat to make sure I'm definitely doing it right. And my back of my frame is 6.5 inches, so that's the size I need to make the SVG in Cricut Design Space. Now I know the size of my frame, I can click on this in Design Space, make sure the padlock icon above the width and the height box is closed. If it's open, you can click it to close it. Then type in the size, so mine's 6.5 inches, press enter, and the other measurements should change in proportion. So now this is the perfect size for me to put in my frame. Now it's fairly small on the screen, so I'll zoom in a little to make the next few steps easier to see. Now we can start working on adding a name. If you want to, you could just add a name into the middle and not add a big initial behind, but I'll show you how to do both of those. We'll start with the name in the front. So I'll go into text over on the left and then type out my name, all in capital letters. I'll select this and then go into the font drop down. And then in the search, type stencil. This will filter to only show stencil fonts, and a stencil font is one that has little gaps in the letters, which means when we cut this out from our horizontal strip, it's not going to lose any middles of letters such as A's and E's and things like that. And I'll just show you with one as an example. This is quite an obvious example. Let's select that one. So you can see, if I move it all the way down here, this is going to cut with little kind of slithers in these letters, which, I mean, it wasn't necessarily needed on the S or the H, but for the rest of the letters, it means you're not going to lose the middle bits in these letters because it will still be joined onto this horizontal stripe. That's the reason for choosing a stencil font in this instance. There is a font which I have used before, which I really like, which is what I'm going to use now. It's called BFC Homemade Stencil. I'll type that in. I like this font because it's got nice sort of curved edges. It's nice and friendly looking, and I think it matches the vibe of the Shadowbox design really nicely. Let's move this, and you want to resize it so that it fits in that stripe, and you've got a nice amount at the top and the bottom, so that will all be held in place. Click on the shadow box and ungroup the layers by pressing the ungroup button at the top of the layers panel. Then I'm going to click on the very top layer, which is the just off-white one, press Shift on my keyboard and select my text. You can tell you've got both those layers selected now as they've both gone green. Press Align and then Center horizontally, and that will put your name exactly in the middle so it's perfectly lined up. And then with both of those layers still selected, go right down the bottom of the layers panel, press Combine and then Subtract. That's going to take your name out of this creamy off-white section. So you see it's now gone kind of grey colour. That's because the layer underneath is grey. If I drag it off to the side, you can see as I move it, it shows the white of my canvas through. And this is now showing that it's going to cut the letters out of that stripe. And that was it for that bit. That was pretty simple, right? Adding a big letter to the background is a little bit more complex, but not hugely so. To start, let's hide our top layer by hovering over where it says Subtract and click the eye icon, and hide the grey layer underneath. It's all of these layers that we're going to be working with next. Once again, click into text, and this time I just want a capital S. You can use the same font if you want to, but if you've used a stencil font and it's got a gap in, that's probably not going to look the best when it's a big letter behind. So instead, I'm going to change to a non-stencil font this time. I'm going to use one called BFC Love Notes. Both of these are Cricut Access fonts. If you don't have Cricut Access, you can use any other font that you have installed on your computer, or just any font that you might find on places such as Creative Fabrica or other font resources. I like this font for this shadow box because it's nice and bold. It's really easy to tell that this is an S. And again, the kind of lines in it, it's nice and friendly looking, curvy letters. It matches the vibe of the rest of the design. Let's move this over and make it a super different colour to anything else that's on the design so it's easier to see. I'll make that a bit bigger. I'm now going to turn this on and then just check I'm happy roughly with the size. And then drag it in the layers panel so it's underneath that grey with the stripe. And that just lets you see a little bit easier if you're happy with how it's looking. Some letters will work better than this for others just because of their natural shape. I feel like an S kind of works quite well because you can still kind of easily tell that that is an S. So I like that positioning. So let's hide those again. But I do want to maybe make sure it's in the center. So to do that, I'll click on the grey I've still got, press Shift and choose the S and go Align Center horizontally again. And just one final check. Yeah, that still looks good. Actually, I'm going to move it down a little. One thing to note is that once you've dragged it underneath the grey, if you then try and move it, it moves the top layers instead, which is very annoying. So you might just have to go Arrange, Bring to Front to do the moving, and then drag it back under again. Just another little Design Space quirk. Now that you've got to this point, there are a couple of ways you can move forward. You could just cut this letter all on its own from a piece of cardstock and then glue it into the middle of the shadow box when you've stuck everything together. The problem with that is that you don't have the shape of the letter on all of these pieces underneath, which means you might find it difficult to get a good amount of depth and dimension with your foam squares, because you can't really stick anything on here because then it will appear lower down than the green. A better way to do it for a more effective 3D appearance is to weld the shape of this letter onto all of the layers underneath. And if that sounds complicated and you have no idea what weld means, don't worry, I'm about to show you. Looking at our frame, we've got 4 main layers. There are 3 shades of green and then this grey, which means we're going to need 4 copies of the letter. So I'll click it and then press the Alt key on my keyboard and wiggle my mouse a little bit. And you'll see that the mouse changes then to get a little plus icon. If you're on a Mac instead of a Windows computer, then it is Option instead of Alt on your keyboard. So with my Alt key pressed, wiggle my mouse to get that plus, and then I can click. And that creates a duplicate layer in exactly the same place. You can tell by changing the colour of this top one, and when I hide it, you see I've still got that pink one underneath. We'll need 4 in total for each of our 4 layers, so I'm just going to press Alt again, click once and twice, and now I've got 3 and then 1 there to make 4 in total. Hide those top 3 and also hide them. Actually, I've done 1 too many because I'm not going to need one for the very bottom because that's all filled in green anyway. So I should have only done 3 instead of 4, but that doesn't matter. That's why there is a delete button. Okay, I'm going to click the next layer up, which is this bright green. Press Shift on my keyboard and choose the S. I got both of those selected, and then go Combine, Weld. That will join the shape of the S onto the layer, so you can kind of see it in here. You'll probably find that this ends up with some tiny gaps in the card that the Cricut would struggle to cut. For example, there's this teeny tiny little bit here, which I'm going to remove. To remove it, click the layer, then press the contour button on the bottom right of the screen. Go all the way down the list, and then you'll have the very smallest pieces at the bottom. So I can click that, and it's going to hide that tiny gap. All the others kind of look okay. So I'm just going to close out of there. Then we can put this back into position by going Arrange, Center Back, and then just drag it above that very bottom green. And that's the next layer done. Move on to the next one, the darkest green. So I've turned that on. Turn on one of the remaining letters. Select the green, press Shift and choose your letter. And exactly the same, combine and weld. This is harder to tell if there are any little gaps because of the dark colour. So if I go and make it white just briefly. No, that's looking good. It doesn't look like there's any tiny gaps. You can double check by clicking it and pressing Contour. Scroll all the way to the bottom and just see if there's anything that you think should be taken out. This piece is actually very little, but that does cut fine. That's actually part of the original design. And I've tested it. It cuts fine, so you can leave that bit there. And then arrange, center back, drag it into place. One left, which is this one. Turn on my letter, select both of them, combine and weld. And there's no little bits on there, so that is fine. This has joined it to these leaves and berries. You might find if your letter is smaller, it doesn't end up touching any of the bits on the outside. And if that's the case, you don't actually have to weld it to this layer because it would cut separate anyway. But it doesn't matter either way. I just like having it joined onto the berries and the leaves. If it does touch, it makes it easier to stick together and to know it's exactly in the middle. And then let's just drag that manually under all of those berries. You might now find that there are some berries that aren't going to be seen at all on your final design because they'll be underneath this piece. So for these, for example, this one, I'm going to click it and delete it, either by pressing the trash can icon or you can hit delete on your keyboard. I'm going to keep this one because you'll still see a little bit of the berry coming out of the end of the S. So now that I'm happy with all those berries, I can drag this grey one above them. So this is how it will look when it's all cut out and stuck together. And then turn these ones back on. And you might be wondering why there are two grey layers, one on top of the other. I'll explain that when we're sticking it together shortly. And then there's this one with my stencil name cut out. And then remember, I made one too many S. So I'm just going to hit delete on that one. And put these ones back on. And there we go, our fully customized shadow box with a monogram letter and a name cut out from a stencil typeface. Gonna double check. Yep, still 6.5. I haven't accidentally resized it along the way, so that is going to fit nicely. It's a good idea to save your project now by pressing save and then choosing where you want to save it to and give it a name in Design Space. So actually, let's just do that. Let's call it Test Sarah Frame and hit save. Now it's ready to be cut out. Press Make over on the top right and that will separate out all the colours for you. You can change the paper size in the drop down. And then if you want to, you can move things around. It doesn't really take up less space because it's a square, so it doesn't matter where you put it, it's always going to use the same. You might end up needing 2 sheets for the grey. I used a silver instead of a grey for a little bit of Christmas sparkle because there are 2 layers on that one. And then all of your greens are also going to cut as one single square. But your red, all the little berries, this is great for using your card scraps because you can move them about whatever position you want. So if I maybe had a little rectangle of card left over from another project, I could put that on my mat and then move all of those berries so that I know that they'll be cut from that scrap. When you're happy with how everything's looking in Design Space, press Continue to connect to your Cricut machine, get everything cut out from cardstock, and then we'll see how to stick it all together. Here are all the layers cut out from cardstock. I've used a shimmery silver for the big initial and also the layer that goes underneath the corners. And then I've got a shimmery white for the very top. Just for a little bit of extra Christmas sparkle, but you don't have to use that at all. You could just use plain card if you prefer. You can already see how nicely that stands out. It's going to be even more effective once everything's stuck together with our foam squares to give dimension. I'll be putting this together with a combination of glue and foam squares. The glue I'm using is Bearly Art Glue, but I also like Collall. And the reason I like both of these glues is because they don't bend or wrinkle the card like some glues can do. The foam squares I'm using are from Dot & Dab, but again, any will do. If yours are really big, you might need to cut them smaller with a pair of scissors. As with all my layered designs, we'll start at the bottom and work our way up. So the very bottom is this lightest green, and then we've got the kind of middle shade of green to go on top. And I will be using my foam squares for this one. There aren't many layers to this shadow box. There aren't many pieces of card. So I'm adding foam to all the layers to make sure it's really dimensional when it's all finished. You could also use foam strips to go around the sides, which would be a little bit quicker. I prefer using the tiny squares, even though it's more time consuming and fiddly, because I find with the strips, sometimes it can pull or pucker the card where it's kind of forcing it straight with that really long bit of tape. Whereas with these, because it's got the gaps between each of the squares, there's a little bit more room for the cardstock to give naturally. As well as adding your foam squares around the edge, also make sure you put a good amount in the middle. Otherwise, there's nothing to keep this middle section stable. So you might find that the cardstock bends downwards like that rather than being nice and flat. And that will impact on the 3D appearance of your frame if it starts sagging in the middle. No one likes a saggy shadow box. Okay, so I've got a good amount on there. Next, I can start peeling the tops off of all of these foam squares to reveal the stickiness underneath. Now I can turn this round. I'm going to line it up and stick it to this bottom piece. But I'm not going to push it down straight away. Instead, I'm going to get my corners and sides lined up as good as I can, and then just gently drop it down. The reason for that is that if I then wasn't happy, like that, I can pick it up and move it and it hasn't damaged anything. So gently lie it down. Check you're happy it's all lined up nicely. If it's not and you are really over on some of the sides, then you may find it won't fit inside your frame. So it is important at this stage to line everything up nicely. But when it's looking good, then you can push down to get all those foam squares really well stuck. And then we'll move on to the next piece, which is the darkest green. Just going to move all these little berries out the way. So that's this one. Turn it upside down, and once again, add your foam squares. Now all these are nice and sticky. We can do exactly the same thing with lining this up. Make sure you've definitely got your letter the correct way up so that it matches. And then I'm going to get those edges nice and level. And gently drop down. That looks good. So push to stick. Next up, we've got the berries on all of these holly leaves, and I'm going to just line them all up before I start sticking them. At this point, it might be easier to refer back to the screen in Design Space, just so that you can check where they all go. They are the same size, so it doesn't matter which one goes on which holly leaf, but the berries themselves are different sizes in these little groups of 3. So I'm just trying to get it all lined up as best as I can. And I'm trying to do it without looking. It's probably a mistake. I've got one left. I'm not sure where this one goes. It's possibly there, but I'm not 100%. So I'm going to have to check. I'm going to have to give in. It might be something like that, but I will just have a little look. All right, I've had a look and I was roughly right, but it's more like that. And all the others are correct. So now I'm going to put all these on with some foam squares. You could glue them if you prefer, which will make the next level of the shadow box easier to put on, but I think they look better when they've got some dimension on it. It helps raise them out from the leaves, makes it look a little bit more realistic. If your foam squares are really big, you might need to cut them smaller with some scissors so that you can fit them in under the berries, especially if you're making quite a small frame like I'm doing. There, and one left. There. Alright, so next is the final layer that's got the big initial on it. This one will be going on top, also with foam squares, but now that we've got the berries on, you just need to be careful that any of this layer that's going to be touching the berries, that you don't put foam squares on the underside of it to match. Otherwise you'll end up with two levels of foam squares, the one under the berry and the one on there, and it won't be level. So looking at mine, I just need to be careful that I don't add any foam squares underneath this bit, or just in that little bit on the S. The rest of it is all pretty much okay, apart from these very tight edge bits, but that should be fine. And I've just noticed a tiny bit of card hasn't quite popped out of the hole there like it should. Okay, I am going to need a new pack of foam squares because this one is not going to last me. Here are my foam squares all on. I haven't taken the tops off yet. I just want to make sure that I haven't got any in the wrong places before I do that. I was quite careful on this to make sure I put a little bit inside all of these little leaves and berries so that they're nice and dimensional when it's stuck on here. So before I make this sticky, just going to lie it on, make sure that there's no bits anywhere they shouldn't be. And you'd know if there was, because if you try and hold it flat, you'll notice that if you've got two foam squares overlapping, it will kind of bulge outwards and you'll see it. But that is all looking perfect. So now I can peel those tops off. Now they're all sticky, we're doing exactly the same, lining up. Get those edges as straight as you can and push down to stick. This is looking really nice now. I especially love the shimmer on that silver card. And then next we have this other silver piece. You might be wondering why we're putting the same colour on top of itself, but it's because then we can raise this bar out, which will help the word, the name, stand out against that initial. And this, you've probably guessed it, is going to be foam squared. Make sure you put some in this middle section so that it stays held on nice and firmly and you get the stability and structure from within it. Right, that's those all on there. I've taken the stickiness tops off so we can line up and gently drop down. Oops, I just managed to pull a foam square off with my finger. Now it's not lined up. I have to try that again. It's really hard to talk and try and line things up at the same time. Right, that's looking good. So push down. Then there's the one final layer to go on top, and this time we are not using foam squares, we're going to glue it, because if you used foam squares, as the bits in the name are quite narrow and also these are quite thin, if it was foam squared on, the shadowing effect that you get from having that gap will mean it's not as obvious where you've got your pretty pictures and your letters. Gluing will make it look much more striking. I'm trying to get my glue in all the little middle bits of my letters to make sure that they're not going to accidentally catch on the frame or the glass when I'm putting this in the frame. And then carefully, so you don't smush that glue out anywhere it's not supposed to be on show, I put that down and ever so gently tap it into position. And now I need to wait for that glue to dry, and then it will be ready to go in my frame. My glue is all dry now, so it's ready to go in the frame. I'm leaving the glass out of mine, otherwise it will just reflect my camera lights and you won't really be able to see what I'm doing. But at this point, you would put the glass in your frame. Make sure you give it a good clean first so there's no dust on it or any smudges or anything like that. And then next, place in your design and fit lovely in there. And then you would put on the back. Now, because there aren't too many layers in this, you might find that it's too far into the frame. So when you close it up, it's not going to hold it all secure. There are two things you could do to fix this. The first is you could add your wooden spacer back inside the frame before you put this on, but then you'll probably find you've got the opposite problem and it's too tall and coming out of the back. When you put the back on, it would squidge up all those foam squares to squish it in, but then you'll lose the dimension if you're kind of pulling it all in together. So what I like to do instead is to place that in and then get some pieces of old packaging material. This is an old Amazon delivery box that I've just cut up into pieces roughly the size of my frame. It doesn't have to be exact. And then you can lie on as many as you need. I think that's probably about right for me. Until you can put the back of the frame on. And now when it closes up, it's coming into the correct position. So everything's held really securely. And turn it round. Ah, I love that. It's really sweet. But actually, it's pushing out a bit at the front. So I think I've got one too many pieces of cardboard in there. Let's take one out and see if it still does up nicely. A really easy and affordable way to pad out those frames. So that's now, it's a little bit moving about. You can see a little bit, but I think that looks better from the front. So I'm going to keep it as that. And once I have put my glass in, that will give it that extra little bit of dimension to probably stop that back moving about. So there we have it, our monogram shadow box for Christmas, all finished. These would look really cute as table places, and then it's a nice gift someone can take home with them afterwards, or just displayed up as a little list of all of your family. If you enjoyed watching along with this video with me, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for loads more Cricut crafts and Christmas projects. I hope to see you tomorrow for day 16 of the Christmas craft countdown. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Bye!